Hi everyone. Okay, so this is the last part of chapter 28 on the nuclear chemistry stuff. So we're going to talk about fission and fusion. Okay, and you need to know the difference between these two different types of nuclear reactions. So let's first talk about fusion. So fusion is when you fuse two nuclei to produce a nucleus of heavier mass. So in other words, you're taking two smaller nuclei, combining them to make a heavier one. Now fission is the opposite, okay? Fission is where we will split the nucleus into smaller fragments, okay, into smaller fragments. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about both of these more in detail. Okay, so we're going to start with fission. So you notice here in this fission reaction, you have a high-speed neutron. It bombards this nucleus. So this is a nucleus. The different colors of the circles here represent the protons and the neutrons that are found in the nucleus. In this example, it's uranium. So when you add an extra neutron to the nucleus, it makes it very unstable. Okay, so it's very unstable. So once it's unstable, it naturally wants to split apart into at least two fragments of similar size. Okay, so notice that that nucleus split into two fragments and the sizes are very similar. You don't have like one really small one and then one really big one, okay? And then also in that process, notice that there are more neutrons that are being released, and then of course a lot of energy is released in the process. So this is also what it looks like if it keeps going. So it is important to know that a fission reaction is a chain reaction, okay? So we have this nucleus, which splits into two smaller fragments. And remember, neutrons are also released in the process. So when you have an extra neutron bombard the nucleus, then you notice that it splits and splits, okay? So notice here, one of these splits into two fragments. So each one splits into two. Okay, and that is fission, all right? It's a nuclear reaction. It'll just keep splitting and splitting and splitting until a stable nucleus has been formed. Also regarding nuclear fission reactions, we mentioned that it does release a lot of energy, okay? Now take a look here. 1 kilogram, okay, 1 kilogram of uranium-235 releases an amount of energy that is equal to 20,000 tons of dynamite. Okay, so that is a lot of energy released in a fission reaction. Your atomic bombs, all right, that is a fission reaction. Nuclear power plants also run on a fission reaction. And one of the drawbacks to fission is that it produces radioactive waste. Nuclear power, it is very cost effective and it does generate a lot of energy, but because of the negative, environmental effects, like now we have to store this radioactive waste until it's stable. So there's, that issue of transportation, and we're running out of places to store them in these underground caves. And so that is one of the big drawbacks, is to have all of this radioactive waste. Also, the fear of a meltdown, that is always a drawback to nuclear fission and these power plants. Like, a few years ago, there was that tsunami in Japan, and then the nuclear reactors basically overheated, and there was a big meltdown. And so, that definitely puts a lot of fear into people environmentally. And so those are things that are definitely concerns. Now, we do have a nuclear power plant that is no longer running, though, near us. It's on the 5 freeway, San Onofre, which is over by San Clemente. And you might have seen it. They're like these big concrete domes, okay? And they have like these red blinking lights on top of them. That's so airplanes don't crash into them. And it's no longer open, but you can actually sign up for a tour if you want. I saw it on Facebook. You can sign up and take a tour of the nuclear power plant. They actually won't bring you inside the nuclear reactors, but they'll let you walk around the outside and give you a tour. So that's pretty cool. Now, you also probably noticed that these nuclear power plants are usually located near large bodies of water, like near the ocean and everything. And there are these pipes that run underneath the ocean, and that's where we dissipate a lot of the heat that has been generated through this fission reaction. And we had learned earlier in the semester that water has a very high specific heat capacity. So remember what that means. Water can absorb a lot of energy without raising the temperature too quickly, okay? But they do have to make sure they regulate the temperature in the water. They don't want to heat it up too much. They heat it up too much. It's called thermal pollution, okay? Thermal pollution. So what would happen if they heat up the water too high is that, once again, we learned that gases are less soluble in warmer temperatures. Gases are more soluble in colder temperatures. So by heating up the water too much, we would decrease the solubility of the oxygen, therefore decreasing the oxygen supply for all the fish and aquatic life. So, there are a lot of things that we have to consider if we decide to go with a nuclear power plant to generate energy. All right, so now let's talk about fusion, okay? Fusion. All right, so fusion, it is referred to as a thermonuclear reaction. What does thermo mean again? Heat, okay? So it says energy released from the sun. This is an example. We know that the sun is extremely hot. Yes, a fusion reaction occurs on the sun. 2 hydrogen atoms will fuse together to make helium. And it says that fusion reactions release more energy than fission. One of the drawbacks to fusion, though, is that in order for a fusion reaction to take place, it has to be in excess of 40 million degrees Celsius, which is a lot of energy. The good thing, though, about fusion reactions is that they do not produce radioactive waste, okay? They do not produce radioactive waste. And so if we think about it, it would be ideal if we could generate power based on a fusion reaction. The only difficult part that is hard to control is that in order to fuse 2 atoms together, it requires tremendous amounts of energy, okay? And years ago, Paris, or I don't know if it's actually Paris, but France won the bid to build the first fusion power plant. And I haven't read any recent articles about the status of that power plant yet, but I know it was a big project, and France was the country that won the bid for the first fusion power plant to kind of like test it out and see how it would work. The reason why that fusion requires tremendous amounts of energy or temperature in order to fuse 2 nuclei together is because, well, let's think about this. We have 2 nuclei, okay? What is the charge on the nucleus? Well, if you remember, the nucleus is positive, right? So if we're trying to fuse together, okay, we're trying to fuse together 2 positive charges, do they naturally want to come together? No, they don't. They naturally want to repel. Remember, like charges will repel. So in order to overcome the repulsion forces, you need tremendous amounts of energy to force these 2 nuclei to want to combine. So that's why it requires tremendous amount of energy to combine or fuse together 2 atoms. This is the last bit of fusion reactions that I want to talk about. Earlier, I talked about how the atomic bomb was based on a fission reaction. Now we're going to talk about the hydrogen bomb, okay? The hydrogen bomb is based on a fusion reaction, okay? Now don't forget, we had talked about that fusion reactions require high temperatures, right? So what they actually do to trigger the hydrogen bomb, they use an atomic bomb to trigger the hydrogen bomb. So it's kind of like 2 bombs in one, okay? And then the last thing about fusion, because it's extremely hot, that's where we get our 4th state of matter, okay? Plasma. Plasma will exist at this point. Okay, so that is everything for chapter 28, and I will see you later. Bye.